If you've got a credible fear interview coming up, you may be wondering what it is and why you've been asked to do this interview. In this video that you're about to see, I'm going to explain those two things to you. This is part of a fuller training that I did on credible fear interviews. And in this section, I'm going to explain to you what a credible fear interview is and who exactly is asked to do these interviews. If we're just now meeting, I'm Brian Manning. I'm a political asylum lawyer. My law firm, Manning Asylum Law, helps people all over the country to secure their future in the United States through asylum. Hey there, and welcome to the Credible Fear Interview Training brought to you by Manning Asylum Law. That's me, Brian Manning, that you're seeing on your screen right now. And my law firm, Manning Asylum Law, is based in Houston, Texas, but we help people all over the country to secure their future in the United States through asylum. And today's topic is the credible fear interview. We're going to cover some of the basics concerning a credible fear interview so that you know what you're getting into. First, what is a credible fear interview? Well, it's an interview where an asylum officer asks you questions about what has happened to you and why it is that you fear you could be harmed if you had to return to your country. It's done for the purpose of determining whether you may qualify for protection here in the United States. So, who gets a credible fear interview? Well, a credible fear interview is held for people whom government deportation officials have encountered and would have deported right away, but for the person saying they fear being harmed in their country. You see, people who are arriving in the United States, whether at an airport or at a land border crossing checkpoint, but whom the authorities determine aren't eligible to enter the country, normally don't get to stay here and fight their case in immigration court proceedings. Often, the government says the person can't come in or can't stay here because the person doesn't have a valid visa, or if they do have one, the government believes the person will violate the terms of that visa. People in this position can be sent back to their country almost immediately, often within a matter of days. This is called expedited removal. It often happens to people who come to the border and tell the U.S. border agent that they want to seek asylum, as well as to people who say this to a Customs and Border Protection officer when they arrive at the airport in the United States. And the same thing happens to people who enter the country illegally and are caught. They're subjected to expedited removal. But you see, if someone who is subject to expedited removal tells the U.S. authorities that they fear being harmed in their own country, then the U.S. government will hear them out. They'll hold off on deporting the person right away. It's kind of like they hit the pause button, at least long enough to give the person's claim of fear cursory consideration. And that's the purpose of the credible fear interview, to give the person a chance to explain why they fear being harmed, and for the asylum officer to determine whether the person might have a shot at qualifying for asylum or another form of humanitarian protection in the United States. Now, that's pretty much the same as what happens at an asylum interview. So what's the difference between those two things, an asylum interview and a credible fear interview, both of which are handled by asylum officers, which is, by the way, the job that I used to do for the U.S. government? Well, people subject to an expedited removal order can't apply for asylum and get an interview. They're ineligible to apply for asylum. Rather, they do the credible fear interview. On the other hand, if someone enters the United States with a visa or enters illegally and is not caught by immigration officials and then later decides to apply for asylum, they will have an asylum interview. The two interviews, asylum interviews and credible fear interviews, are quite similar, but the outcome is very different. After the asylum interview, the officer can actually give you asylum. But that's not the case with a credible fear interview. If you get a positive decision in a credible fear interview, you do not get asylum. Rather, you get the chance to present your case more fully in immigration court proceedings. After a positive credible fear determination, you'll get to argue your case in front of a judge where you can present evidence and even have witnesses testify in support of your case. And the judge will decide whether you get asylum or perhaps another form of protection that will allow you to stay here or will instead be deported. I should note that at the time that I'm making this training, the government is considering having people who get a positive credible fear result go on to have a full asylum interview in front of an asylum officer rather than before a judge in immigration court. So the process could change, but the idea is the same. If you get a positive result in your credible fear interview, you won't be deported immediately and you'll have a chance to fully state your case for asylum. You see, a credible fear interview is what's called a screening interview. The asylum officer is doing a fairly superficial analysis of whether your circumstances, when considered in light of applicable laws and government policy,
might give rise to a viable claim, such that you should have the chance to really present your case in full. And because it's a screening interview, the officer is not actually going to give you asylum, even if they think you have a good case. Also, a credible fear interview is normally much shorter than an asylum interview. As where an asylum interview normally lasts for at least 2 hours, and does in fact routinely stretch to 3 or more hours, a credible fear interview is usually closer to an hour in duration, or perhaps 2 hours where it's done in person rather than by phone. And I'll say more about that distinction in a minute. It's pretty much the same kind of questions at both types of interviews. It's just that the credible fear interview is less in depth. The officer usually asks for fewer details, and it's easier to meet your burden of proof. And that's important to understand about your credible fear interview. There's a pretty low bar for getting a positive decision. What do I mean by that? Well, as where at an asylum interview, you've really got to convince the officer that you meet all the requirements for asylum. You can get a positive decision in a credible fear interview by being slightly less convincing. If it looks to the asylum officer like, yeah, I can imagine that this person might be able to put on a good case if they were given time to really prepare their case and to present it all in formal proceedings in front of an immigration judge, then the officer will likely give you a positive credible fear decision. Because remember, it's a screening interview. The asylum officer is trying to weed out the cases that have virtually no shot of success, the ones where it's clear that the person can't qualify for protection under U.S. law, and to send on to the next stage the people who at least have some chance of winning their case. All right, now you know why you've been asked to do a credible fear interview, and you have some idea of the purpose of it. Let's get into the really important stuff, like what you can expect to happen the day of your interview and how to prepare for it. Okay, where and how a credible fear interview is conducted depends on whether the person is detained. Traditionally, most credible fear interviews have been held while the person is being detained by U.S. immigration officials. When that's the case, the interview is done by telephone. You're connected to an asylum officer on a conference call, and they interview you by phone. This usually happens within a few days of the person being detained, but sometimes it's much later. If the authorities decide not to detain someone, or they've detained them but then decided to let them go, then the person will have a credible fear interview in person at an asylum office. Due to changes in government policy about whom to keep detained and owing to a surge in people coming to the southern U.S. border to seek asylum, non-detained in-person credible fear interviews have become much more common of late. Lots of asylum seekers are being allowed to enter the country and are asked to come to an asylum office for their credible fear interview. These people will receive a letter from the asylum office informing them of the date and time of their scheduled interview. This letter may come within days of the person being let into the country, or it could take weeks or perhaps even longer, owing to backlogs. The letter will come to the address that you've given to the authorities when they decided to let you into the country. It's crucial that you let the government know if you change addresses, because you don't want to miss this notification letter. If you don't show up to your credible fear interview, you can be deported without getting a chance to really state your case. Now, if you're watching this video, you're likely in the non-detained group of asylum seekers who have an upcoming credible fear interview. The internet normally isn't accessible in immigration detention. So I'm going to focus for the rest of this training on the mechanics of in-person credible fear interviews rather than detained credible fear interviews. We've covered a lot in this training, so I really do think you'll go into your interview better prepared and more comfortable than you would have had we not spent this time together. But if you want to go even deeper, if you want personalized guidance ahead of your interview, or if you want to consider hiring a lawyer to actually represent you at your credible fear interview, then my team and I would love to talk to you. It starts with a strategy session where we'll discuss your situation and we'll tell you in detail how my law firm might be able to help you. It doesn't matter where you are in the United States. We help people all over the country, and we'll do your strategy session through a video conference, so it doesn't matter if we're not in the same area. So to get that set up, to schedule your strategy session, call us today at 713-909-0401. Once again, that number is 713-909-0401. So call us to set that up, or you can actually schedule it yourself online by going to my website, www.manningasylumlaw.com. You can see it on your screen. I hope you've enjoyed this training as much as I've enjoyed making it for you. Thanks, and I hope to have the chance to support you in your asylum journey.